You guys can prepare your questions while they hug. Maybe we have some hands. Anybody got a question? Over there in the cap, yeah. Mike's coming up.
I was wondering, when was the movie filmed?
Sorry, I missed that.
When did you shoot the film?
Yeah. How long ago was it filmed?
We shot that film, we started shooting August the 25th, 1984. And we had a 25-day shoot, 24 days? Yeah.
5 weeks. That's it.
Can't get more precise than that. Yeah, in the middle there, if we can get the mic over there in the...
Hi there. First off, great work, everyone. It was a fantastic film. Absolutely adored it. My question is, it's been a few years since the film was released, and I'm just curious, looking back and watching it again all these years later, you guys are a little wiser, shall we say, and I'm just wondering, how do you see it when you watch it now versus when you watched it when it first came out and when you made it?
It's funny, but that kiss at the end seems longer now. Oh, you've got a mic.
I was just telling Sandra that watching the film, it's kind of like me. I'm not watching myself. I'm watching like a childhood friend of mine or something from my past. Yeah, this film, 30 TIFFs ago, this film had its world premiere at the Festival of Festivals. And it went on to win a lot of awards, as Steve had said. And when it first had its release in Toronto, its theatrical release, I remember having never seen a film that had run in the cinemas for over 4 months. It really found an audience, and audiences just kept coming to see it. And thank you all today for continuing and being a part of that. Yeah.
Let's hear from those guys.
Gabrielle, would you say something? Oh, well, I thought it was beautifully rendered, and you just went down to LA and did this, didn't you? And got this element. I thought it was beautiful. And the sound of it, the Cadillac car door creaking. Everything was there. And I just thought what you had done, the sort of, in a way, campy nature of the film was more there than I thought it was. And that's partly with time passing. But I also saw that you had definitely, deliberately created that, had that in there. So I thought it was lovely. Sea Cruise went on forever, the song Sea Cruise. I couldn't believe how much time it went on. Have we paid for that? I don't know about that.
Maybe you should get the money back. It's too long.
What amazed me was what a great soundtrack it was. I thought, wow, how was it affordable? Like, how was that possible? And I thought it was a beautiful print. And I thought it was, just to see it again was like really held up after all these years. Totally held up. I wish we could see it again and it could continue to be screened somewhere.
I was telling Peter, we did the DCP, the Digital Cinema Package, at Stampede Labs down in Los Angeles. And the 18-year-old kid behind the console, after the film was over, he says, "Oh, Sandy, I really like your film. Was that scenery real?"
Wow. What a view.
Yeah, right there.
Hi.
Hi.
I thought the movie was cool. I have a question. If you were to shoot that same movie today to appeal to, I guess, the populations that exist in, urban areas and, say a big city like this, what's perhaps one or two main things that you would change to reflect, like, the people that you're trying to reach?
You mean if we were to shoot it as it was in 1959, or if we were to do a contemporary version of an American coming up to visit his Canadian cousin?
In today's day and age, yeah.
I know. I've thought about that. And it would be completely different because the times are completely different. And of course, we'd put a little more color in it, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
chances are the music would be a little different too. So.
Oh yeah, totally everything, all the clothes, all the little bits, yeah, and probably even the because I think the I'll call it love, might be called sex, is so innocent in this. So I think the whole if we were to do it in like 2016, 17, it would be a completely different film. But still, maybe you should do that movie.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, thanks.
Maybe you guys can talk later. But I did want to get back to the scenery thing, because you actually, that's the location you used, the ranch, was familiar to you.
Peter probably remembers this part, because I insisted on going back to the ranch where I had grown up, and I insisted on shooting in the house where I'd grown up, and they wanted more money than Gabriella wanted us to pay, and Peter didn't want to go for that location, and we were looking for other locations, and then I don't know what the final, do you remember anything about that, Peter? I just remember there was a great deal of debate about the cost of the ranch.
And you got it. We got it.
And I got my way.
That's it.
Oh, so that's what I was going to ask about the location. You're saying that was your family ranch, or what happened to it now? What's become of the? Oh, I'm just talking here.
Well,
but what happened to it now?
Sandy, I want to say one thing. It was, in fact, at the time we shot the film, it was no longer a cherry orchard or an apple, any fruit there. It was a wine. It was a vineyard, and the grapes went to Sumac Ridge, one of BC's great wineries, and they make great wine still, and grapes still come from there.
Actually,
No, not anymore.
Paradise Ranch. My dad sold the ranch in about 1960, and it changed hands several times. And it's now owned by somebody. He used to just be Tony Mendel, but now he's Anthony Von Mendel, and he's got Mission Hill Wines. And so the ranch now, it's been completely manicured. The guy made so much money when he sold Mike's Hard Lemonade, and he's pouring money into Paradise Ranch now and building a huge house the size of a shopping mall. And it's cheek by jowl vineyards. Nobody lives there, but I still walk all over it like I own it, but I don't.
Yes, it was the location that we used in the film where Sandy actually grew up. And the room that was Sandra, the young character's, was actually her parents' room in that house. And for an actor like me coming into a location, first of all, from our writer-director, and the film was pretty semi-autobiographical. Oh, yeah. So it was like, oh, this is not the art department putting up a sign that says Paradise Ranch. That was the Paradise Ranch, and that's where Sandy grew up, and that was the gate where her real American cousin went through. So that is great stuff for me as the actor to have worked off of.
And another thing that just came to my mind was the very first shot, which I always think of as Pete's shot, because we'd been filming at the ranch, and then we had to wrap out of the ranch, and Pete said, now what about the first shot that I'd written in the script?
Scene one.
The high overhead, looking down on the ranch. And I said, oh, Pete, we don't need that. We've got lots of other stuff. We don't need it. And he goes, I think we do. And
Thanks. That was quite a little battle we had there, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I remember driving backwards, because the road only was wide enough to go one way, to that particular location. And they just said, Sandy, hold the Panavision camera. Were you there when we shot it? I think you probably were. Oh, you were.
I was at the bottom of the road, yes. In case the car came down.
Sensible spot to be.
Anyway, we got there, and we got, luckily at Pete's insistence, we did get that shot, and it's a nice opener.
Cool. Next.
Thank you.
We got somebody in the middle there? Yeah.
This is just a question for John Wildman. In your preparation process, do you do anything different or special to play an American as a Canadian actor?
That's a good question. Yeah. I did a lot of research on this part. I had leads in films before, but I never had like the jeune premier, like the leading role of the film, like in this one. So this was before internet and before computers. So I did a lot of research through renting video cassettes and going to the reference library and reading about whatever American stuff that I could find through those methods. But you know, when I realized I was going to be playing a teenager in the 50s, I started to talk to people who were teenagers in the 50s, my parents, who both are here today. So thank you for your inspiration on this role. And they were saying that at the time when they were teenagers in the 50s, their role models or the people who they felt as their cultural heroes were the movie stars and some of the rock and roll people. So I watched a lot of Marlon Brando films, Marilyn Monroe, films that were made in the 50s, not about the 50s. James Dean films, obviously. So I felt that this character would have emulated a lot of the gestures or the style of those iconic figures of his time. You know, he tried to walk like Brando, or he tried to like look like James Dean. And just watching those actors perform, I sort of would listen to their dialect or their ways of speaking, and I sort of tried to do a sort of not like a very strong American accent, but something kind of in the middle of all the stuff I had looked at using. And after a while on the set, I just kind of got into a role on it, and it just. That's where it basically came from.
I just wanted to introduce someone. The music on the film, which was made in a very, very on a very small budget, was recreated and directed by Bill Skolnick, sitting right over there. Bill, would you just stand up, please?
Yeah, I will.
I never had a chance to thank you for that. Thank you, Bill.
Great job. Yeah, in the middle there.
I want to thank you for this production. This has just been a treat for my husband and I because we had our honeymoon in Kelowna, and we know that road along the Okanagan Lake. But I want to ask you, Sandy, you wrote the script, and then you decided you wanted to put it into a movie. Tell us a little bit about what happened when you first started the process.
I have a little cabin that's next to Paradise Ranch, and one summer, my partner Phil and I were up there with our young son Will, and the song came on the radio. It was The Battle of New Orleans by Johnny Horton, and that's when I got the idea for the movie. I said, oh my goodness, I remember this song coming on in the summer of 1959 when it was a big hit, and my cousin Butch would turn it up on the radio, and my dad would say, turn that damn noise off. And I didn't understand what the problem was, but my father was upset because the song was all about the Americans whooping the English. And I thought this might be a really good movie. And so I took out my lipstick, and on the window I wrote My American Cousin, as if I was still only 12, which there's part of me that still is. And it looked pretty good, and so I started writing the script, and I remember that I gave one of the earliest drafts to my mother. I said, Mom, take a look at this. And she read it for a few pages, and then she threw it down, and she goes, oh. And she walked out of the room, and she said, I can't stand it. It's too real. It brings it all back. I don't know how you remember that. And she was mad, and I thought, ooh, goody. This is good. This is really going to work. And so I kind of kept at it. I didn't know what the format was for a script or anything, so I had to buy the book by Sid Field, how to write a screenplay. And then I took a couple of weekend courses on how to write a screenplay. And then they
didn't know that, I don't think. They just found out, actually.
Anyway, and then I would pitch the idea and talk the idea to anybody who would listen to me. I wound up taking the idea down to the Cayman Islands looking for some money. And the CBC was actually the first real supporter. They came across with a letter of intent to broadcast. The National Film Board helped me out enormously, helped us out enormously because I'd made documentaries for the National Film Board. So they gave me an office and an electric typewriter and let me use their long distance phone lines so I could keep phoning Pete and like that. And then Telefilm had the program, they had some kind of a policy where if you had a broadcaster and if you had some private equity, they would come in for the final 1/3. And then that's when Pete came and got the money pretty much squared away. And we were actually already up at the Majestic Motor Inn. My friend Joey was there too. We weren't sure whether the money was going to come in place, and maybe you can speak, but as I remember, we weren't really sure that we had the money until about a week into the shoot.
That's pretty early, I think. It's a little later than that. My friend Chalmers Adams, who is a lawyer in film up there, knows that you might not know you've got the money till you finish shooting the film, but we got things paid for. That's the main thing, and then it sort of got the financing was completed.
I know there's another little story. This is another story I enjoy telling too. When we were getting ready to do the mix, and Dave Harden at the Alpha Cine Lab sort of looked at me and he said, "Now, Sandy, before we start this mix, I want to know, you're going to pay for this, aren't you?" And I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Absolutely, Dave. Yes, we're going to pay you." You were sitting there on the bench reading your newspaper. Dave walks out of the room, and I turned to Peter and I went, "Ah!" And Peter says, "There, now you can call yourself a producer."
But Dave
remember that?
it all worked out with Dave, right? So
Sorry?
it all worked out with the lab, so it's all good. Never mind.
Everything got paid for.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
there we go. I actually wanted to ask a question because your mom was, despite her reluctance to read the script, was in the film. She plays Aunt Nell, right?
Yep, my mom was Aunt Nell. She loved the whole process. And originally in the script, and as we shot it, she had a line which was, "I'll just go get the tea then, shall I?" And then when we had to cut the film down, because the film was too long and it was incredibly kind of boring and slow, and so I cut out, 10 or 15 minutes. And I cut my mother's line, and she never forgave me.
She was in the water scene. She was coming out of the door right when Sandy goes in. Right. By the way, everybody, that was Mrs. Kitty Wilson.
Go ahead.
This is a question for John. Acting's such a strange thing. I just wanted to ask you what your views on acting are, or I don't know, things that maybe you've taken from your journey as an actor. I just wanted to ask you. Do you have anything?
Well, acting is a collaborative process. I mean, it's not like a musician where you can get up in the morning and just play music. You know, acting, you can rehearse, you can do stuff, but it requires a great director, hopefully, another bunch of great actors, a good script, and a lot of elements to have a performance scene on film or TV. So, it's like, I started, I think I've been doing films for probably 48 years now. I've been on film sets, so I kind of started just as a kid being a kid.
He looks good, doesn't he, for that? Eh?
But then I decided I was really going to study acting, even though I had been on sets and I had my actor card and all that. So I studied, and I was around great teachers, and I was around other community. I was around a great film community. I grew up in Quebec in the 60s and 70s, and I spent a lot of time working at the National Film Board, like Sandy had. And I keep thinking our paths may have crossed there in the 70s, and we didn't even know it at some point. But yeah, it's a tough thing to do as a profession because things, and I know from personal experience, things can run hot and cold. Like I've been fortunate enough to make a lot of good projects up here in Canada and work with some really quality people. And I don't think there's one thing, well, there may be one thing on my resume that I wouldn't want anyone to see. But I don't have that thing that some actors I know just like, oh God, I was in that thing, you know. But so I guess I've just been very fortunate that I have been around good people. And I continued, you know, there's been times when I've sort of stepped away from the business and done other things in my life and come back into it. So it's an interesting journey, you know, and seeing the film here again after 30 years, it's amazing because it brings back a lot of that early enthusiasm around being an actor. And I have that now, but it's a different way because, you know, this was 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. So I you know, it's an ongoing process, and I would just say don't give up, persevere. If you have a dream or a vision for yourself, just keep at it, keep working. Put yourself on tape. You know, are you an actor? So if you can't get that audition, do a self-tape. Like, you know, if there's a part that speaks to you, just keep going for it. Don't let the casting people tell you that you're not right for it. And incidentally, I'm really happy to be here today because apparently I wasn't even supposed to be in this film, which was a story that Sandra and I were just laughing about yesterday, actually. I wasn't even going to get an audition when they first met me. So it just goes to show you that it's a funny business, and you just follow your passion and get good people around you. That's what I would say.
Okay, we can do one more. Well, we'll do that, gentlemen, then we'll try to do it quick and then get the guy in the middle. So go ahead.
I just have a fun, quick question for John. Can you still do the lighting the match off your pants thing from the movie?
It's funny you mentioned that. Actually, there's a funny story about that. I got that from Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire, and I figured that my character would have seen that in the film and done that. That was actually something that my father told me. He said when he saw Streetcar Named Desire, he came out of that cinema trying to walk and talk like Brando for the next 3 days. And I thought, wow, that's what that period was about, right? And when I went in to Penticton, when I arrived the first day, I go into my wardrobe fitting, and Sheila goes, where did you get those jeans? I said, well, I bought them on Yonge Street. And I ended up wearing my own wardrobe in the film. Those are actually my pants. So they go, yeah, that's easy. Made it easy for the wardrobe people. Just go with that. It's great. But I got to keep them at the end of the film. And I was doing the laundry one day, and I noticed there's this like white patch in the back of like tattered material. And I was like, how did that get there? But it was from the match thing, yeah.
It went too early. That's
the whole story of that. But there was a lot of moments like that that I borrowed from other performances I saw about that what I thought was relevant to what my character Butch would have seen and would have tried to emulate from those icons of that era.
The gentleman in the middle. Yeah.
Just a very quick question. Any plans for a Blu-ray release?
Plans for a Blu-ray release. Well, the DCP's done, so that go ahead.
It's a distinct possibility, and it's firmly up in the air at the moment.
We're working on it.
Okay.
I have
Well,
just a quick thing to say.
go ahead,
This is
Peter.
really just in making this film, John. We're glad you did that and got that part in this movie. Thank you. In making the film and deciding for me to produce it with Sandy, it was the spirit of the film, the positive and Canadian spirit of My American Cousin. It was in the script, it was in Sandy, and it comes from Sandy Wilson. It's your spirit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job. Thank you guys so much for the film, and thank you guys for coming. Thanks a lot.